How do you build leaders? How do you make other people lead, right? Put them in a position to lead. How do you help them grow? How do you let them know that you want them to grow? I'm actually holding you accountable to your growth. Like if you stay stagnant, then that means I'm not doing a good job. And I don't like to be in a position where I don't do a good job. So now I'm going to hold you accountable to your own growth.
Julian Zilberbrand is a veteran media and technology leader with deep expertise across the entire advertising ecosystem. He currently serves as the global head of data solutions at LG Ad Solutions, where he drives data strategy, advanced advertising innovation, and partnerships that shape the future of connected TV. Prior to LG, he spent nearly a decade at Paramount and Viacom as EVP of Advanced Media and Audience Science, leading major initiatives in programmatic, measurement, and addressable TV. Before entering the network world, he held senior roles at Zenith, Starcom, and Publicis, guiding global digital activation, insights, and technology transformation. Julian, thank you so much. Welcome to the pod.
Thank you so much for having me. Really looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, thank you. And as you can tell, we have a new co-host, Julie Kelman-Reading. I'm very excited about this conversation, especially having Julie here because we bring different sides, gives it a 360. Our viewers, our listeners are going to be very excited and hopefully learning something from this conversation. So thanks again for coming on. So Julie, I know you've been eager for this conversation, so why don't you get started?
It's been very informative just reading about you and your background. So I'm excited to hear more. And one of the things I was curious about was how do you view data analytics now in collecting that information versus 5 years ago?
Obviously, there's more information now than there was yesterday, right? That's just the nature of our business. I think our ability to capture that information now, process it, leverage it is significantly faster, right? Obviously, between all the enhancements in technology and we could do a shot every time we use AI in this conversation. And there's going to be a lot of drinks. So obviously between AI and between our ability to both kind of create and then process more data, it's just you're able to make decisions in a much more sophisticated manner. You're able to make decisions in a much more functional manner. You're able to predict things in a much more comprehensive manner. So I think every day that goes by, we get more and more kind of invested in technology and what technology could do for us. And that only helps specifically in the data analytics space.
One of the reasons why I really wanted to talk to you is because you've lived every side of the media machine. So from agencies, networks to audience science, you've done it all. What part of your process for understanding a problem has stayed consistent, would you say, across all those environments?
Sure. And I have done a lot of things, which basically says I'm old, which is, I guess it's good to still be around. So that's a nice thing. I think one of the things that really maintains across time is, at least in this space, is the consistency of how you evaluate the quote unquote problem or what a problem is. Typically in our space, they fall into really, first off, you try to simplify things. I think that's the process that I always undertake is how do you simplify what the complexity or the problem is? And how do you do that quickly and efficiently? And then how do you bucket what it is? And they typically fall into three things, right? They fall into like technology challenges, they fall into contractual challenges, and they fall into human and communication challenges. Typically, they're going to fall into one of these three buckets. The sooner you're able to reassess and react to that, the quicker then you could then address the problem, right? If it's a technology problem, you bring in the people that are significantly smarter than you, that understand the technology in a way that's deeper than you could, and hopefully they can help facilitate the solution. If it's a communication problem or a people problem, then you have to facilitate discussions and how do I work with people and how do I get people to communicate where they haven't before and what are the gaps and how do you quickly assess those? And then if they're contractual, that's a different problem. And how do I work around that? And that might be one of the more complex and challenging things. It's also one of the simplest things to try to address. Not that it's simply to solve, but it's simple to isolate and address, right? So to reiterate, right, like it's simplify the problem, figure out where it fits in the ecosystem of challenges, and then bring in people and processes to help deal with the issues.
You've been in it for such a long time. The type of infrastructure that you were building before compared to what you're building today, especially what you're building at LG. What does building a modern data infrastructure look like?
Sure. I think when we first started out, it was a lot of, hey, what's this DMP? And then it became a CDP. And now we're past that scenario where everything sits in the cloud and you're trying to use technology to build on top of that infrastructure. So like at the end of the day, there's the reality of how you store information, how you access that information, how quickly that information then can get leveraged. And in previous instances, like the first iteration of this, like what was the DMP 10 or 12 years ago or 15 years ago, right, was just like, hey, how do I just get like data and audiences in one place? And we've evolved to the point now where we're really about how do I get information? What technology do I put on top of it to process that data? What is my ability to then turn around and leverage that data with some level of speed, right? And that's really the difference is speed, right? I think
Mm-hmm.
that the challenge has always been from a time capsule, if you will, perspective, right? It's what's available to you from a technology perspective, and then how do you leverage that information? And the variance now is today we just have the availability to do it so much faster, so much more efficiently, and then so much better, right? It's like the stronger the technology, the better you're able to execute and leverage the kind of data that you have access to. I think speed is like the really big delineating factor between today and yesterday, so to speak.
Why should somebody care about what you do, especially folks that don't really understand on the front facing side of things? Because I remember when I was always in production, always in development, and I never really understood the behind the scenes kind of stuff, what the product people do and the tech people, the data people. There were all these teams that I never understood until I got into more of an operational role. A lot of people don't really get why they should care. And then I also worked on the metadata side where if you don't have clean data, then nothing's going to work. Why should people care about what you do?
I don't know that they should.
They
What brand
should.
is?
They
Well, look,
absolutely should.
I have two roles at LG. I have the data. I oversee our data sales and our data organization, and I also have one foot in the media world where I manage one of our large holdco businesses. And the reality is that you cannot separate the front from the back, right? All these things matter. I started in this business in a client service role, in an operation role, in a technical support role 25 years ago, or wherever that time frame was. And I always took it upon myself to know every part of the business, right? So even when I was first coming onto the agency side, my job was trafficker. That's your job. But if I don't understand how the media planner goes about doing their business, then, I'm missing something. If I don't understand how the publisher is executing on their side, I'm missing something. If I don't understand where the creative comes from and what the thought process is on the creative and where they might want to change or leverage that, then I'm missing something. And so it's really important to understand all elements of what we do. You don't have to be the down to the minutia expert and everything. You should have basic awareness. Now, obviously, the more you understand, the more you're able to apply that understanding to other parts of this business. And I think the most important thing we could do as leaders in this business is to explain to people that it is your responsibility, it's your accountability to understand other people's roles so that you understand how to be empathetic, right? Like that empathy kind of aspect is a big part, I find, of leadership. So why you care is because the more you understand, the more you can relate, the more you can then help lead. If you have no concept of what the other side does, you cannot lead. And the important factor of any leader is to be able to lead people, not only that work for you, but then
Mhm.
don't work for you. And they're still willing to follow you as a leader because you've taken the time to understand and empathize about their side and their responsibilities. So I think
Mhm.
that's the best way I could answer that question is you should care because that's how you become a leader, right? By caring, by taking the time to actually give a shit.
To know what every role is so you can lead your team.
100%. 100%. Right. And again, you have to care. I think it's important. You have to care. You have to care about other people. And we'll get to it in the questions that we ask. But people is a really important part of this equation. And if you don't take the time to understand what makes somebody tick, if you don't take the time to understand what accountabilities people have in their own jobs, then you're not doing your job, as far as I'm concerned.
The way we break the podcast, we focus on four key pillars: process, profits, people, and planet. So this
Yep.
is the process part and why we're asking these questions. And I love what you do, Julian, because I know it's the DNA behind our universe, the media
Right.
universe. I believe that this next era is all about process.
Sure.
Automation is going to a whole other level. We're looking at teams that are becoming way smaller. We're looking
Sure.
at budgets so becoming way smaller. But at the same time, people are demanding more. And somebody like LG, you guys are creating content. Everybody's a content creator now. How do you see this next era, like the process that people need to think about, and creators, content creators like Julie, how should they be thinking about the processes that they need to be adopting?
It's twofold, right? The first is like process for the sake of process may not always be necessary. It is process for understanding why there are steps to take to lead to some kind of conclusion, right? Or value conclusion, if you will. So when I think about process, what steps are necessary, right? If you look down at the end of the tunnel and you go, all right, what are the steps I need to take to get to the end of the tunnel? And there's always steps to take, right? So you have to put kind of these processes in place in order to execute what you're doing, but you can't be rigid about them either, right? And I think there's a healthy dose of process for the sake of process because it's important to give people direction. And most people require some semblance of direction. They need to understand step one goes to step two, and step two goes to step three, and so on, or else they're going to deviate in ways that will eventually not lead to some successful resolution. On the other hand, putting rigid processes in place for everything isn't always the solution either. And I think you do have to have measures of flexibility when it comes to this kind of stuff. So you could set the structure of things and then maybe allow for some flexibility within it. Again, depending on the task and depending on what we're trying to do. Like we're looking at like just holistically across a variety of different tasks, right? Whether that's content creation, whether that's ad operations, whether that's sales, whatever it is. Like you need to know where you want to end up, and then you can set the markers for where the steps are for you to get there. Because there's no kind of skipping steps in a successful kind of act. Where at the same time, you want to manage this rigid approach to you have to do it this way because that doesn't always work either. I think that tends to be a balance that really needs to be put in play.
Very well said.
Yeah.
And again, that's with content creation as well, because nothing ends up
100%.
exactly as planned. So you have to be able to adapt.
100%. Look, when we think about content creation, traditionally people were creating hour-long dramas and 30-minute comedies, and that was the structure, and that's how it was. And all of a sudden, we became a society of goldfish, right, with 7-second memories, and now everybody sits on their phone and doom scrolls 2-minute clips or whatever it is. And the truth is that, but when it comes to something like content creation, I think you need to understand where the consumer mindset is and develop towards that. And that's part of the process of creation, right? Is understanding what people actually want to see.
How are you guys thinking about these new revenue models, especially at LG? What should we be looking at in the future, specifically on revenue models?
I don't know if there's a significant shift in the revenue model per se. I think that there are a variety of different ways that companies can find ways to make money. If you look at us as a business right now, our business is in CTV, our business is in home screen, and the application of what the experience is on an LG television, and our business is data, right? And all those three levers are the foundation of what we do. And then you will have variations on those foundations, but the foundations potentially remain the same. In other words, hey, if my foundation is I make money selling inventory across CTV, then great. But there's going to be a variety of different ways. Before it was a 30-second spot. Now you have pause ad, you have screensaver ads, you're going to have squeeze back ads, you're going to have all these a variety of formats that create new capabilities to generate revenue, but aren't necessarily new in the grand scheme of revenue generating. When you're talking about like our home screen environment, for when, again, this is very specific to LG, but I know this is applicable to the other OEMs as well. You're going into an environment where you're now making a content decision. What am I going to go watch? Because you're no longer scrolling through a cable EBPG, right? Electronic program guide. You're now like searching for the app, and then you're going to search within the app. You're going to come to an environment where you're going to be exposed to marketing, and that will evolve over time. And I will tell you that evolution over time is not going to be demonstratively different than what has happened on the internet. It just will be happening on the TV in its own way. And maybe there'll be slight variations, but the model will remain the same. And the same is applicable on the data side. Like I will generate data, I will generate more effective data, more metadata, whatever it is. And then I'll have a variety of ways that I can monetize it or a variety of potential interested parties on the monetization of that information. But the model remains the same. I think when we're talking about the advertising world, I don't know that there's a million different revenue generating models. I think that there are a million different variations of traditional models that then get optimized to the environment. And over the course of time, you're able to like leverage more opportunities to generate that revenue.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. I think that's the kind of stuff that we're all trying to catch up on. Like, how do we, as quickly as possible, learn all this stuff? What do you do to get yourself up to speed? Like, how do you stay future forward?
I tend to have a future mindset, right? And my goal is always like in my head, and what I try to say to when I work with people is you need to be 2 steps ahead. If you're not 2 steps ahead, you're already behind.
Yeah.
While I would always recommend, obviously, people live in the moment, So I don't want to confuse myself as I'm talking, but you need to live in the moment, but you do need to think a few steps ahead as well. And so if I'm thinking a few steps ahead, then, you're always in consideration of what is going to come. And that helps you understand what you could do in the moment and where you can manage things as they evolve over the course of time. And for me, it is mindset is really important. And then if I have that mindset, that means I'm hungry for information. That means I'm consistently consuming it. I'm reading, I'm watching, I'm listening, I'm talking to people, I'm trying to learn from other people, right? That is a never ending thing, right? That's, I think, how I tried to do it, right? You're not going to read every bit of information, but there's a lot out there that you can read. And I do enjoy doing that. I think talking to people is and networking and just having relationships, that's probably the single most important thing that I would ever tell anybody that ever worked for me, right? Is your job is like, hey, your job is this, right? You're supposed to do X, Y, or Z. Go sell this or go fix that or go whatever it is. But in the process of doing all that, go meet people. Go network, go talk. That is the other part of your job. And you should take that part as seriously as you do the other side, right? So, and I try to get people to get out of their shells and get out and meet people and talk to people, because the more we learn, the better we are. But if you're just going off of what is readily available on the internet, you're not necessarily going to get all the salient information. I think you do need to have conversations. You do need to talk to other people, and you do need to focus on finding people smarter than you and learning from them. Lucky for me, I'm not really bright, so that leaves a whole hell of a lot of people for me to learn from, which is a really good thing for me. And I try to do that as often as I possibly can.
I love that humility. You're one of the smartest people I know, so I love
Yeah,
that you have that humility.
that's questionable, but I appreciate the compliment.
You're in such a fascinating world, and just hearing you speak is like undeniably, I'm learning every single word that you say. How did you come up to this place? What did you start off in? I know that you've done so many different things.
I thought I would work in news if I was in college. So I was a little bit of a slacker as a kid in high school and so on. And then in college, I always thought I would work in media. I never knew what. But I was a latchkey kid. I spent all my time with television and film and so on. And so when I got to college, I very much gravitated towards that, right? I gravitated towards television and film. And I studied, my major was TV radio, and I thought I would produce it. And as I got out in the work world, trying to find those jobs, they were not super readily available. I happened to come across a friend of mine from college one day on the street, leaving what can best be described as a Ponzi scheme kind of job, where I spent the day at a company going, this probably is not for me. And I left and ran into this person, and she hired me to go work at MTV. Fabulous young woman who I hadn't talked to in some time, but I'll never forget that kindness. And that was my first kind of move into the media world. I spent about a year at MTV. I had then I was working in MTV Online. That was the name of the product, MTV Online. This is many years ago.
Was that Dermot's team?
This is probably before Called About a Dennis. There was like, so there were a lot of good people there. And I spent the year being a production assistant on the website. I learned HTML. I learned like how to really play with web pages and so on. Nothing that I had wanted to do, right? Like I wanted to produce news. And after a year at this job, I went to the powers that be at MTV, and I was like, I don't really want this internet shit. Point me towards the television. And they were like, we're going to pay you less going here. And I was like, just make me flat. And they were like, yeah, no, everybody wants this job, so fuck off, which was totally understandable. And I had a friend that worked at DoubleClick, and he was like, come interview over here. All you need to do is know HTML. And I was like, oh, I just learned the HTML. And I went over there, and obviously I made a couple more dollars. And then I just started down this wave where all of a sudden a lot of this stuff just started coming super naturally to me. The client services aspect, the technological aspects, and so on, just like really came natural, intuitive for me. And I spent a little while there before September 11th, and then obviously some cuts over there. And it really was when I got to an agency that my education really skyrocketed from there. And I would recommend anybody starting off in this business in the early stages, 21, 22, 23, 24, to work at an ad agency. I think there was simply no better education in this market than working at an ad agency. You get exposure to things that you won't in other ways. You will learn other people's jobs, because I think that's part of the equation. And that led me in the direction which I ended up in where I am today.
You want to hear something funny? I worked at MTV.com, I think the same years. And I thought you looked familiar. So I wonder, and I...
Wait, 99, 2000, 1999?
Around there, yeah. I was a show's producer. I produced like Hero and...
I was just a peon. I was a production assistant. My job was to literally, when I tell you, Julie, which by the way, love your name. My job was to watch Road Rules and Real World for about 5-6 hours a day and edit those clips, which today I still can't really watch reality television just from like the scars of that experience.
Did you work with Amy Constantino?
Yeah, I think she was there. I worked for the woman that hired me was a woman by the name of Vincenza Pizzo.
Yes, I remember she trained me.
Vincenza trained you?
Yes, she did. She taught me how to do the production schedules where every day you send out the update of what needs to be done. And then at the end of the day.
Yeah, so I went to school with her. She hired me for that job. I'll never forget her for that. I'll always keep her in super, super high esteem in my eyes. I haven't talked to her in quite some time, and I had gone back to Viacom after 15 years, and we had some interaction when I came back, and then she left. But she definitely was one of the kind of fire starters to my career.
Yep, that's so funny.
Small world.
I still have dreams that I go back to MTV.com because it was such an amazing couple of years.
It was a fun experience. 1515 Broadway at the height of TRL and so on. It was definitely a cool experience. One that'll never happen again.
When I told my mom I was working as a PA, I had to go in a room and watch hours and hours of content for the VMAs. So best kiss, best this, best that. My mom didn't understand what I was doing, why I went to school, paid all that money for college to get in a room for hours to watch.
That's right. You just Mom, I get paid to watch TV. What are we doing here?
Oh, okay. All those years I was trying to get you away from it.
Yeah, it's funny how that works itself out.
It paid off. I think all of us that worked at MTV or maybe in television have similar stories, how our parents were trying to get us away.
For sure.
I'm reading Tom Preston's book right now, and I'm way back right into 1999. It's incredible.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Back to you. So with all the data and all the analytical information you have, where do you think, in terms of smart televisions, where do you think content is going to go from here?
We're in a weird influx moment, right? Like you're looking at the technology that's available, and I think you're going to start to see lots of AI content and things of that nature really start to flood the market. I think that, again, I'm not saying this simply because I work at a smart TV manufacturer. I do think that the glass becomes a much, much more important player in the space. I think that I look at a company like LG and I don't see short of subscription, I don't see a demonstratively different model than Comcast, right? Mm-hmm. It is a MVPD, but just newfound, right? We don't have to have the consumer subscribe. They have to buy the hardware, so to speak. But then you are the kind of arbiter of available content. You are the arbiter of how they might find that content. You are certainly understanding behaviors and patterns of people so that you could recommend things in a significantly better manner. So it's one thing that I can go into Netflix. Maybe Netflix is a bad example. I can go into app A, it doesn't matter, right? And that app will learn over the course of time. I watch this, I could recommend that. But when the TV is able to understand all the things that you're consuming across a variety of different ways, especially in the fractured way that we consume today, like that understanding of behavior and consumer kind of direction, I think is really important. And I think twofold. I think the consumer electronic device, the OEM, becomes a much more important player in the overall scheme of television, right? Which was very much networks and cable companies and broadcasters. And I think as those cable companies move away to simply be kind of streamers and so on and so forth, I think the OEM fills that gap and really becomes like part of that ecosystem and a really important part of that distribution ecosystem. And then conversely, when we talk about like the challenges of television, and I could talk for 5 hours on measurement of television and so on and so forth, which I will not bore you with. But the thing that I think is one of the big solutions to the challenges of measurement in television is that your OEM has the capability to solve those problems if everybody wanted to play ball, right? I'm not saying everybody will, but in the instance that everybody wants to play ball, many of the challenges that come with the measurement complexities of television get solved because the glass is able to capture all the information in a variety of different ways and then provide real census level data to back up the needs of the measurement ecosystem. So I think both on the distribution side and on the measurement side, I think our company and companies like us become much, much more important as the ecosystem evolves over the next several years.
I see that.
You talk a lot about impression-based thinking, moving towards household level thinking. What does that mean?
I think it means that traditionally TV has been a reach medium and reach frequency medium measured off panels. We've moved now to an impression-based ecosystem where addressability matters. And once you get to the point where you have levels of addressability, then outcomes start to matter. And again, when you look at your phone, it's a personal device. And when you're taking action on that personal device, it is meant for me. So I have my wife and my son at home. If my son does something on his phone, it's him. If my wife does something on her phone, it's her. If we do something in front of the TV, it's the household. And I think when we start to get to the point where TV is now being accountable for some level of outcome measurement, and obviously there's a lot of complexity there and not a lot of nuance there, and we're not fully there because behavior patterns don't necessarily speak to at the moment transactional things on TV that's just starting, if you will. And it's hot and everybody talks about shoppable TV, but it's very little. But that's because the behavior doesn't exist, right? Like part of the media ecosystem is helping facilitate the shifting of behavior. And as the behavior starts shifting to actually being able to engage with your big TV, I have a 77-inch TV in my home. Like I'm going to want to engage with it when the capabilities match up to what the behavior opportunity is, whether that's voice related, whether that's a remote built for that, whether that me being able to do things through different kind of use cases or different tools. Either way, once I start engaging and consuming and then leading to outcomes on my TV, then we need to start thinking about it from a householding perspective and what that means and how we think about not only simply reporting on that, but how we think about foundationally measurement on the back end of existing advertising engagements, right? Like I'm delivering something on a television environment. There, you don't know who's in front of that TV. You could have 5 people in front of that TV. And if I turn around and I deliver some semblance of an outcome there, I sign up to something, I buy something, I whatever it is, then we have to think of that from a household perspective. And while you could try to tie back to an individual, I think that if we open up our minds to just focus on the household, we'll get to a lot of quality measurement that provides value there as well.
Can you break down in simple terms, what does automation and programmatic workflows mean?
Automation, I think, is pretty straightforward, right? It is the automation of certain tasks and functions, right? When we talk about programmatic, you're simply talking about the enablement of technology to help lead towards certain functions. In the semblance of, let's say, advertising, it's the enablement of investment in a manner that allows for automation to play a big role in leading towards that purchase capability, right? What does that mean, right? Like programmatic is often thought about as real-time bidding, right? So it's a biddable environment. And I think like real-time bidding is part of programmatic. It is not programmatic. Programmatic is the allowing technology to enable and facilitate the full funnel function of buying and selling advertising. Again, when it comes to this space. So if you're a buyer, how do I turn around and leverage technology that allows me to deliver one-to-many in a more efficient manner? How does it limit the amount of time I have to spend setting up campaigns and trafficking campaigns and doing that? Can it help facilitate measurement and all these functions? If you're a seller, how does it help me reach a multitude of buyers or a variety of buyers in a quick, efficient manner at scale and with volume? And so programmatic is simply the enablement of automation and allowing technology to enable the automation of the management of the ecosystem between buying and selling. That's the way I would simplify that. And then there's a bunch of nuances on either side, both in the technologies that you use and the capabilities that they deliver for the actual user, right? So on the buy side, it might be optimization, making decisions, predictive modeling, quick optimizations based on outcomes or KPIs that you set in place. On the sell side, it might simply be, how do I move inventory to the marketplace at a faster degree? How do we execute campaigns on behalf of clients and deliver the outcomes and KPIs that they're looking for? And then how do I ensure that the setup of that and the operational kind of enablement of all that is efficient, quick, allow my people to then focus on other things that are just as valuable in the funnel. So it's really the automation of the operation. It's never as complicated as people make it to be.
Efficiency is key. We talk about it a lot here. In
Efficiency is key.
Podcast. And sometimes when I go into the production side of my life and producing, things aren't as efficient as I know they can be. It gets frustrating to me, and then
it gets frustrating.
Yeah,
that's right. That's right. And so what we've done in the advertising space is create efficiencies, enable speed, enable better decision making, and enable people to have opportunities to do other things with their time that are more valuable in the grand scheme of a business.
You've led massive transformations inside companies that you worked with. How do you lead different cultures and how do you bring people with you during changes?
So again, I hate to be redundant, but I try to lead with empathy. That manifests itself in a lot of different ways. That might manifest itself in terms of, hey, I know what you do for your job and I'm empathetic to what your challenges are. Or I understand what makes you tick and what motivates you. And I try to use my ability to understand that to help lead and drive you in a way that is most effective for you. I tend to take a individual personalized approach to people. Every person that you deal with, every individual is a different relationship. Each individual relationship requires its own kind of management. The sooner you understand what those triggers are for individuals, you understand how to lead them. You try to come with, at least I think, a few different approaches. The first is you need to be confident in yourself. Nobody wants to follow somebody that isn't confident. So you should know your shit, because if you don't, you'll be a pretty shitty leader. So that's step A. Step B, after you know your stuff, how do you make people feel, right? People follow people that make them feel certain ways. And how do you think about how you make people feel and you considerate of that? And how do you engage with those people? So like my leadership style has always been to focus on the fact that people need to know that I care. People need to know that where we're going, we're going to do it together as a team, that they know somebody has their back and that they know that there's somebody's going to fight for them. And if you have those things in place, then I think people tend to be willing to follow. The other thing that I think is really important is you try to both work with people and hire people that are smarter than you, or at the very least have skills that you don't. And then you allow them to use it, right? Like that simple kind of manner. Let people who are good at things do those things and don't get in their way, right? So know where to step in, know where to step out. Don't be a micromanager. Encourage people to be leaders themselves. Encourage people to be themselves and to bring the best of themselves to the equation. And I think if you do those things, people tend to want to be with you, right? Forget about leading, if you will. People tend to want to roll with you. When they want to roll with you, then they'll do the things that need to get done because that's their accountability and responsibility. And the last thing I would always say is with all of that and all the niceties and all that other things, because I think I'm a nice person, hold people accountable. If you fuck up, I'm going to hold you accountable for it. I'm not going to necessarily fire you unless, that might happen over the course of time if you keep fucking up. But if you simply let them know, like we're human, it's okay if you don't do something perfect, but you do need to put the effort in. And I have to see the effort and I have to see that you care because I know I care. And if I don't see that you care, then I don't want you with, and I'll be really clear about communicating that. But if you care, then we're all in this together and we're going to end up at the place that we need to be. And if we take that approach to things, then I think that tends to lead to really like good leaders in our space. How do you build leaders? How do you make other people lead? Put them in a position to lead? How do you help them grow? How do you let them know that you want them to grow? I'm actually holding you accountable to your growth. Like if you stay stagnant, then that means I'm not doing a good job. And I don't like to be in a position where I don't do a good job. So now I'm going to hold you accountable to your own growth. And it's a weird way to look at things, but it's really all of a sudden, then people think, oh, then I need to do this because I'm held accountable to it. And then in nature, then they grow and then they can lead other people and they pay it forward and all this other stuff. So I think if you take that approach, you tend to be really successful, I think.
Yeah. You touched on two things that are important to us that we've talked about before, which is the empathy and the humanity, especially in the world of technology, because it's so easy to just be like cold and numbers and strategies. And especially when humans are working on things, and empathizing with people on that level is really meaningful.
Yeah. Look, especially as we get more automated in AI, right? I think I saw the note the other day that AI can already do roughly 12% of labor, like in general. And that's going to continue to grow, right? And so that's not a bad thing. Obviously, now as people, we need to reorganize what we can do and what we're good at, right? Innovation and creativity and all these things that technology can't do that people can. Leadership, making people feel, et cetera, right? So I think it's really important to never forget that companies are people and your team are people and your bosses are people. And so everybody's a human. And therefore, everybody requires you to take the time to learn, if you can, to learn about them and learn about them as individuals. And I'm not telling you you have to know the name of every kid, of every person that works for you, because God knows I'm terrible at that kind of stuff. But I think if you show people you care and you hold people accountable to also care, and that leads to a really good human infrastructure, right? And that leads to kind of people all kind of rowing and pushing in the same direction. It's when everybody feels like they're for themselves that you end up in this kind of really poor ecosystem where people hate to be there. And I never want to hear anybody that I work with, forget about whether they work for me or not work for me, like just anybody that I work with when they say they hate going to their job, right? That's sad. You should never hate what you do. Like you should love what you do. Otherwise you're not going to be good at it. And so it requires you to, if people know that they're cared for, then I think they tend to really look at their actual work and realize that it's not so bad, right? We all like to be on a beach and relaxing, but that's not what we can do. And that doesn't pay the bills, unfortunately. I haven't found a way for that to pay the bills yet. One day.
So we know that media and data have an enormous cultural influence. What responsibility do you think media and tech companies have in shaping cultural experience and audience well-being?
I think they have a huge accountability. You could look at where we are today, just even as the globe, as a country, whatever, and the complexities that we have with the political discontent that exists, and realize a lot of that is driven by media. And so media holistically has a massive accountability to people. And therefore, there's a massive amount of ethics that I think should be involved in media, because we do impact people in real ways. And we do impact mentality, and we do impact change, and we do impact kind of people's moods and all of this stuff. And so there is this ethical responsibility that I think we have in media that, every joker with a microphone is media, which I don't necessarily believe to be the case myself, but I don't know how else you would describe that. So if everybody has a platform, then everybody has some responsibility for influence of people. And there has to be ethics behind that. And I think a lot of that is missing today. And I think that's something that it used to be in place, right? If you looked at television in the 1950s, whether it was overly repressive or not, like there was and that shifted over the course of time as people and society evolved. And I think we're back in a place where if we're not applying these ethics in media, and media doesn't feel any sense of accountability to the impact that they have on people, then we're really going down a really scary place as far as I'm concerned. I think we are in a really, again, I think you could get to some basic level where there's some consideration about what is released and what is at scale. And I think we can get there. On the other hand, honestly, like the cat's out the bag. The social media ecosystem terrifies me, frankly, and the way that it's leveraged is scary. And I don't know how you shift that without those companies being held accountable, right? There's a law that makes them unaccountable for the things that are on their platforms. There's a very specific law that basically allows for certain internet companies to basically not be held accountable for what goes onto their platform, because it's not their fault if some maniac is saying something crazy on their platform. And I would tell you, unless that changes, then we're just going to continue down like this crazy path that we're on. If the law is changed where now, hey, your business, the same way it is on television, if you get on the evening news and you say, fuck, you're going to get fined, right? And so people don't do that. Right? They understand not to do that. If Facebook, as an example, or whomever, right, any social media company is held accountable for some of the stuff that's on their platform, they're going to manage that a little differently than they do today. Unless that changes, we are really down a scary path.
And we know that's happening. It's just, it takes a long time. And it's also...
It does take a long time. There are lobbyists and there's a lot of money. There's a lot of money against that.
On both sides.
On both sides. 100%. 100%.
Yeah.
And again, look, I understand the positioning. If you're a company that, is a platform, you can't be held accountable for everything that everybody puts. It's certainly not reasonable, but I don't know what other direction we could go that would then hold these companies to account for some of the things that they allow on their platform. Free speech, non-free speech, there are lines.
Yeah, and especially when it comes to kids, because I will say...
Especially when it comes to kids.
For me, the scariest time of raising them, besides making sure that they're both boys, they weren't running off and jumping off of things and breaking their bones, was when they were on their tablets or phones. And I'm not going to specifically say a platform, but things out there that are definitely not for them.
Listen, again, I'm not a proponent of censorship. Obviously, I'm a very firm believer in free speech and so on. But there are lines and there are ways that you could manage that. And I would tell you that I don't think a kid under the age of 18 should ever see a social media platform. I firmly believe that. I think it creates the level of toxicity and what is happening to kids today. Again, I don't want to take that this morbid path, but it is there does need to be some rules into that. And I think that's part of some of the accountability that we're talking about. So it's the ethics part of this that I think we need to lean into a little bit more.
Yeah, let's hope we go in that direction.
Yeah.
We are partly responsible for that. We're the ones making the content. We're the ones designing the systems, the infrastructure. We're the ones approving things. So we have to step in and do more.
I agree.
I'm always about being accountable for sure.
Yeah.
Julian, you've lived through every major shift in advertising for the past 20 years. What's the single biggest misconception people still have about the future of TV?
There's a lot of linear is dead thing, which I
What
think
does
is
linear mean anymore?
literally delivered by a landline, right? Like a cable line or through broadcast. That's
Yeah.
linear.
When kids today touch a screen and they can't swipe left or right, they're like, this TV's broken.
What is that?
What is this?
Yeah. My kid is going to be 20, and I will tell you when he was 1 or 2, he would already start to come up to the TV and swipe, right? Because it was his concept was an iPad. But there's always the linear is dead thing, and I said that, right? But I think the biggest misconception tends to be that it isn't an important environment for kind of individual engagement, right? So I talked about the household thing, but I think with the way that people tend to, the streaming systems and so on allow you to get to your own environments. So there is a lot of personalization that does exist. And so like you do have to manage a little bit of both household and personalization in this TV environment because you have all of it there, right? Nobody gathers around the phone, but they do gather around your TV. But I also watch TV by myself, right? So I think, I don't know if it's a misconception or if it's what people don't understand is that I think the TV will become your phone. And I think like the device that is your phone, like that goes away, right? And that becomes your glasses or whatever it is. And I think people don't understand the power of the big screen in the house. Like they do and they don't. The TV will become your phone. It will operate in many of the same ways. You will be able to engage with it through your glasses or through your wearable devices and so on and so forth. And that will change and shift behavior. It will allow for TV to morph into this really full management ecosystem environment where I will be able to go and exercise and leverage my TV for that. And I'll be able to not only be able to use content, but I'll be able to shop and I'll be able to, if I was a young lady, I could go on my TV and be able to say, hey, I want to see what I look like with this color lipstick. And you're going to get to that. And I want to see what I would look like with red hair, right? Like Julie. And it would be weird for me, but I think that people are not really understanding what the future of TV is. I think that's the big misconception. You look at it as simply an environment with which you consume content. And I think it'll be an environment not only to consume content, it'll be an environment for you to distribute content. It'll be an environment for you to engage and shop. And it will become a consumer electronic equal to your phone. We call it a smart TV, but people still think of it as dumb relative to your phone. And I think it will be more powerful than your phone ever was. It's coming. The vertical dramas, comedies. Yeah, I think that there's a place for short form. And I think short form is a great environment to reach a consumer. I think the gap in short form is that you don't build relationships in short form. And I think the thing that like is undervalued, right, over the course of like content creation, if you will, right, is that I watched Cheers because I wanted to see what Norm and Sam were doing, or I watched Friends because I wanted to see what Joey and Rachel were doing, or I watch whatever, or I watch a drama because like I'm invested in the characters. You don't invest in characters in short form. You're getting your fix, you're killing time. Obviously, if you take an hour-long drama and you cut it into 6-10 minute thing, is that still short form or is that long form cut up, right? I think just the development of short form really fits the nature of people today because their attention span doesn't speak to it, but it leaves out the emotional connection that you could develop with a show, with programming that allows it to be a cultural thing and allows it to be something that like you talk about, quote unquote, at the water cooler and so on. And so the real focus on short form is really trying to attack the short attention spans of Gen Z and younger millennials, so to speak. And I think it misses out on the reality that you won't build relationships with those consumers and those programs won't have the same cultural impact and they won't have the same advertising impact, frankly. There's a really big difference in I'm watching just a bunch of short form content and then I see an ad for brand X or brand Y and I don't really connect it. It's just like there, right? And it's cool. I may engage or not engage and last touch attribution and whatever, and it'll get some value or there's attributable value to that. But there's something to be said for the development of long form programming and then the advertising that gets aligned to that, having some connection to that. And having that program really have an impact on the consumer, and then the advertising being able to play a role in that world. So, I consume short form content like everybody else. I'm sure you both do as well, and I think it's great. I tend to look at it as a time killer, as opposed to I really want to connect And I think when people want to connect, they're going to connect with content like vertical. I'm assuming you mean on the mobile phone. And like I said, I look at that as kind of time killers that you don't develop relationships with. And I think that's the beauty. That's the TV that I grew up with. And I'm sure the TV that you guys grew up with, where you develop a relationship with the content and the people, and it means more, I think.
Yeah, that's a really good answer. And I don't know that a lot of people are talking about that in terms of the advertisers, because everyone's just very hot on making these vertical dramas now.
From an advertising perspective, you want to be where the eyeballs are. And so of course you're gonna be there, and you're gonna spend the money, and it's important to be there. Obviously, it's useful and so on. But I do think that there's something missing there. I do. I do think that you don't think about what the importance is when you are connected to characters and what it means. That's why I think there's a lot of focus in this space on audiences and targeting and so on. And you see a rise right now in contextual targeting, because now I can watch a video and then in real time know that somebody acted like they had a headache and deliver an aspirin ad at the end, so to speak. And I do think the connective tissue of what you watch and the relationships you develop does connect to the advertising that is associated with that content. And I think if you miss out on that, I think you're missing out on something important.
Should we be looking at shoppable TV more? And what are you really excited about next?
We should be looking at shoppable TV. Obviously, I think it's a cool thing, and I think it's the future. I do not think that the natural behavior pattern exists, nor do I think that the infrastructure for its function is at its optimal place. And what do I mean by that? So if you watch Thursday Night Football on Amazon right now, every ad that comes out has a call to action and an ability to engage, right? But your engagement is tied to you foundationally having the remote control in your hand, which nobody does, and to get to that action. And so there's a behavior shift that has to happen over the course of time. And that will come with the advancements and capabilities that exist with that. So when I can get to the point where I'm watching that program and I could simply say, oh, interesting. Probably we're not applying to the degree that we should, because media is now fragmented to the point where send that beverage to my phone. I want to order it. Or I could basically say, I'll have a pair of glasses on. In my periphery, I'll have a shopping environment. And on my left, I might have something else. And I'll say, I'll be watching a program, and I could then go to the left and say, I'll buy that right now. And I'll do that. Like, it's a behavior thing, and technology is a big part of it. But I think shoppable is in its infancy, right? It's in diapers. And over the course of the next 5 to 7 years, as the consumer electronic, and this is why, again, I'm super excited to work at a company like LG, as the consumer electronic evolves over the course of time and facilitates this change in behavior and makes it easier for people to do shoppable or to have that mentality. And the ability to do that doesn't require all these ancillary things to be in place, the remote or this or that. I think you will see that TV will be the ultimate environment for where shopping happens and where engagement happens. Zero reason why I can't go onto my TV, go to an environment. So an LG, right? You go to a home screen when you first turn on the TV, and we have hubs. There's a sports hub, and there's a gaming hub, and there's a music hub. There's no reason that in the future there's not going to be a beauty hub, right? Where my wife will then go in and go, all right, I want to see this Balenciaga person. I want to see what it looks like for me, and I want to know what ratio it looks like, and stand in front of the TV and have that person see exactly what that looks like, and then basically go, great, I'm going to order that, right? And so on and so forth. I think what we're looking at today is really like diaper level stuff. We're not even in the second inning of shoppable TV. Like in a few years, we're going to be really someplace where it's going to be incredibly engaging and incredibly useful. And TV will be like the shoppable environment. I love what I do. I love this industry. And it's weird to say I love advertising, but I do. But I get excited because like you do have an opportunity to help foster and lead what this next generation of life experience looks like, both from a content perspective, from a content delivery perspective, from a shopping perspective, behavior. Like I'm personally fascinated with humans, right? Like find people super interesting in a good and bad way. And I think the opportunity to help shift culture and to help shift kind of behavior is really interesting for me. And I think we're in like I said, we're in a real inflection point where like technology is moving at like light speed and changing daily. And that has an impact on all parts of our lives. Mm-hmm. And to have any kind of input into that and to have I would be able to see what it would look. I'm sure it'd be amazing. My wife would love it, I'm sure. Engagement in that just really gets my juices going. So like the ability to help A, bring some level of morality and ethics to it, B, to help shift influence and culture, and C, to help lead the way in a business that I really care about and think about, probably unhealthily, is something that really gets me excited. So I'm excited for that. I'm excited for change. I'm excited for evolution. I'm certainly excited to talk about this kind of stuff with smart people like yourselves. And I'm happy to be one of the many people that help move this industry forward.
Wow. I think we could stay here all day.
I got all my questions in. It's so fascinating because even like just producing, we talked about linear content for a second, like having that research behind what we do is so important. And you guys are just taking it to a whole nother level, thinking about the future, and yeah, super valuable. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I love the conversation. I'm always happy to do it. What you do is important for our space, and it's great to participate.
Oh, thank you. Julian, of the 4 pillars, process, people, planet, profits is the pillar that's driving you right now.
It'd be funny after this whole conversation, I said the profit, but it's not. It is the people. I think the people make it fun. The people make it useful. The people make it important. The people are why we do this. And the people, to me, are the first and most important aspect of all this. And then obviously people will make process and people will make profit. And then if we don't have a planet, that's a different story. But I think the people are really important in this. And I think the more we focus on the people and the more empathy we have for people, the better we'll be as a business.
Where can our audiences, viewers, and listeners find you?
You could find me. I'm pretty easy to find. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm there. I'm pretty out there in the ecosystem. I attend a lot of different events and so on. Maybe I'll join your podcast network. Hi.
I just got some guests in here. These 2 girls. So this is Hannah.
Hi.
And this is Amara.
Oh, I love your name.
We have fans. We have fans in the show. All right, Julian. Thank you so much. Thanks for joining us on The Media Machine. If somebody sent you this, it's because they care about you and your future. The Media Machine is created by me, Johanna Salazar. I'm also the host and executive producer with Julie Kelman-Redding, who is also the co-host and editor. See you next time.